David Foster Wallace was a master at writing about pain, and today we're going to be examining Wallace's system and his framework for writing about pain. And if you guys don't already know, Write Conscious is the headquarters for everything related to David Foster Wallace. I have a ton of videos on Wallace in the playlist down below, so go check those out. So obviously Wallace, a child who was born with a lot of talent, but born into a household that was very weird. His parents were both professors, and they were high academic expectations that eventually led him to start using drugs to meet those expectations. And we all know that David Foster Wallace committed suicide because of the inner pain that he was experiencing after getting off antidepressants and not being able to get back on them. And so now we're going to hear Wallace talk about pain and where it really comes from. And this is a really enlightening quote because every single year, we start to blame all of the problems that we are having on TikTok. Why are there so many goth emo kids that are cutting themselves and self-harm going on? And as a teacher in the public school system for the last 6 years, I've seen that get worse every single year in a radical way. I mean, in my first year or two of teaching, I had no one email me saying that they were in a mental hospital. Now it happens all the time. At least once a week, one of my students is having a major mental health crisis. And so let's hear Wallace talk about pain, which maybe is the root of a lot of these problems. Quote, "It seems distinctly Western industrial anyway. In most other cultures, if you hurt, you have a symptom that's causing you to suffer. They view this as basically healthy and natural, a sign that your nervous system knows that something's wrong. For these cultures, getting rid of the pain without addressing the deeper cause would be like shutting off a fire alarm while the fire's still going. But if you just look at the number of ways that we try like hell to alleviate mere symptoms in this country, from fast relief antacids to the popularity of lighthearted musicals during the Depression, you can see an almost compulsive tendency to regard pain itself as the problem. And so pleasure becomes a value, a teleological end in itself. It's probably more Western than US per se. Look at utilitarianism, that most English contributions of contributions to ethics. And you see a whole teleology predicated on the idea that the best human life is one that maximizes the pleasure to pain ratio. God, I know this sounds priggish of me. All I'm saying is that it's short-sighted to blame TV. It's simply another system. TV didn't invent our aesthetic childish here any more than the Manhattan Project invented aggression. Nuclear weapons and TV have simply intensified the consequences of our tendency, up the stakes." And Wallace is 100% correct here. And that is one of the main missing aspects of Western culture in initiations into adolescence and then into adulthood is the aspect of pain. In most other cultures that are pagan, there is aspects of pain to reality. It isn't pushed away. And you can see a lot of this in really even all throughout the Bible. But pain is the impetus of transformation. And that's what we are resisting most of all. And one could say, if we want to go even deeper here, what we're resisting most of all is actually just oneness and neutral balance. Because when you hit high levels of pleasure or high levels of pain, then you screwed up along the way. You are activating the sympathetic nervous system when you go full David Goggins and work out too hard, or you get really angry, or you're in a deep amount of pain, which people love to do. We love to throw ourselves into these controlled environments of pain and then numb ourselves with drugs, TV, porn, whatever, to be into high amounts of pleasure. But none of that is earned. You know, going crazy on a kettlebell workout is great, and we should all do it for our health. But it's at a soul level useless. You accomplish nothing in terms of gathering resources and really kicking off that kind of biological feeling of accomplishment. And the same goes with eating a bag of chips or watching porn or participating in hookup culture. Your brain, you get the release, you get the brain chemical drop, but you don't get the fulfillment of actually accomplishing it, of that something that deserves that brain chemical release. And our culture, as Wallace talks about, is totally focused on alleviating the symptoms. And when we look at Infinite Jest, that's the problem with Hal and with Oren, is that they are not addressing the pain. And a lot of the funny stuff in Infinite Jest when it comes to addiction is some of the roundaboutness and some of the bullshit that we experience when we are going through 12-step programs or trying to beat our addiction. Because when you've become a pleasure addict, when you've gone that deep and you have to pull yourself out of it, you are a vessel to be preyed upon as you are recovering. This is why so many people don't recover and get roped back into bad relationships or into drugs with their old friends and whatnot, because we don't have a culture that really promotes seriousness and growth. And when you look at old photographs, this is one of my favorite things to kind of make this point. When you look at how people used to look like 100 years ago, 100, even 120 years ago, no one, some people smiled, but everyone looked older. People that were in 30 looked like they were 50 because they were going through a lot. There was a seriousness to life. We didn't have chitty chitty bang bang and singing in the rain yet. And all that is great. And I love all that myself. But when I look back at my life and I look back at a lot of the people who raised me on that stuff, they had terrible lives, you guys. And even like guys like David Foster Wallace. And they were using that stuff to fill a void in their heart from a bad childhood and bad relationships and trauma and unfulfilled artistic life and all these other things. And that's why they play music at the grocery store to make us feel like we're on a journey, like this is the next step in the chapter of our life. But we're really just buying a bunch of GMO food and meat that is just absolutely terrible for us. Not because meat is bad, because it was just factory farmed BS meat. And the same goes with over the counter medications. Like all throughout time, people got over colds through natural remedies. I was sick a couple days ago, and instead of taking ibuprofen or Advil, because I live here in the desert, I have desert tinctures, and I took them, and they alleviated my symptoms. Did they alleviate my symptoms as much as ibuprofen? Absolutely not. There were some times when I was sitting there just dying with a fever. I was like, bro, just give me some ibuprofen. But I didn't take any because I was like, ibuprofen is not good for me. But a creosote tincture, which has been used by the Tohono O'odham for thousands of years to alleviate, symptoms of the head cold and whatnot, worked about 50 to 60% as well. And I experienced none of the effects. And I actually went through and had to think as I was sitting there while I was sick. I was like, damn, I made some bad choices. I need to get some more sleep sometimes. I need to be less. And when I am going throughout the day, I need to give time for relaxation and to lay down and just lay down for 20 minutes and not do anything in the middle of the day. Anyway, there are a lot of things that you can do to transform through the pain, because if you have pain, if you have a bad shoulder, if you have tightness in your upper back, you can go see the chiropractor, or you could start stretching. And this is all kind of coming to head with this idea of Wallace talking about television, because television is really antithetical to transformation. There are certain shows out there, The Sopranos, The Wire, a lot of animes I've seen, a bunch of other shows that I'm blanking on, but there's easily under 10 shows out there that actually, and we could say movies we could throw in there too, that actually can create anywhere close to the transformation that a book can. And a lot of it has to be TV shows, because if there's 15 episodes across 7 seasons and you are a captive audience for like 100 hours, that's like you could read a ton of books during that same amount of time anyway. And even better than books, life experience and meditation, or having a family and experiencing deepest amount of love, that's way better for transformation than the television or even books can give you. But Wallace makes a great point that when we go back to John Stuart Mill and utilitarianism, that whole maximization of the pleasure pain ratio has been a big aspect of our consciousness for a long time. That is what the aristocracy has been forever. That's what we are still trying to do. That's why designer drugs are getting more and more prevalent every single year. The cars keep getting better, the phones keep getting smaller, the services, and now with AI, you can interact less and less with humans and have everything done for you if you have enough money now. And the pleasure just keeps increasing. Men and women are continually getting hotter and hotter every single year. That's probably just because we have more people in the world and we can access them through social media and stuff and see all the random outliers. Back in the day in 1850, if you were the hot girl in hot woman in a small town in Kansas, some dude, some billionaire or rich guy in British Columbia isn't going to be able to know that you exist. You're going to marry the top guy in Kansas. But now today we're all interconnected and we could see all these different people. And now this has all gotten to the point where TikTok and YouTube and this stuff has taken over the cultural, but it's a two-sided coin though, because right now, right on the other side of all this, mindless culture is just transformation. Right now, everybody has a phone in their hand. You guys are watching this. Everyone you know has a phone, and everyone could transform almost immediately through technology. We have reached the point where now it is possible. It was never possible in the past. It was possible through the invention of nuclear weapons and high level military technology to actually create the greatest peace ever known to man. But instead, greedy people, including the United States of America and other Western and in Eastern countries, including China and Russia, have exploited that power to shave profits off of other countries and not use their power to maintain peace across the world. All the major powers are guilty in that regard. I mean, it's so now we have the ability with these crazy technology to go kill a ton of civilians or a ton of people with these crazy bombs and drones and have no risk to us. The pleasure ratio of war is the highest ever until we get into massive ground war because we can just nuke people and send in drones, especially if you don't care about civilian casualties. And the same goes with social media. I don't even have to turn on the TV. Back in the day, that was the crazy thing that happened with the remote control is you used to have to switch the channel. Then when the remote happened, that was a big deal because now you can just sit there. Now with the phone, you can do a couple taps and never even leave your bed. You don't even have to deal with TVs anymore. Now with Apple Vision Pro, you can walk around and continue throughout your day. You don't even, you look weird if you're walking around with a phone like this, but now you can and still function in reality. And once again, we're at the point though, because the greater the technology, the greater the power we have. You could be on your Apple Vision Pro, like typing out your novel or like doing something crazy and reaching out to the people and educating or helping people. Or you could be seeing what's going on with Duke versus North Carolina in the basketball game last night. It's endless. So we have to stop blaming everybody and we have to start doing. Every moment you spend complaining is a moment you could be spending creating. This is why I've been like not reading my comments as much, or I read all my comments, but like not responding to the trolls and getting it because I'm just like I could be focusing on creating more good in the world. Eventually, those people will come around. But right now, trying to spend all my time trying to convert or convince one person about some one minute point related to David Foster Wallace, and if he believed this or that, that's not it. And every single one of you guys is an expert in something and can share that or have the ability to be able to do that. And it doesn't have to be through video like this. It doesn't even have to be through blogging or writing or even art. There is a crazy opening up of different types of artistic mediums almost every single year, and you can eventually find your slot, find something that you care about, and then contribute. And we can slowly transform media, which will slowly transform everything else. But we can't be the people who are at the job. I mean, I've been there before. I'm sure you've done this a million times before too. You're at the job and you're sitting and complaining at some big corporation, acting like it's going to change it. You're hanging around the water cooler being like, this sucks, blah, blah. Nothing's going to happen. So either you can spend your time transforming your own life so you can get the hell out of here, or you can sit and keep complaining. And the people who are complaining usually stay in those jobs forever. This doesn't have to be our life. We actually want pleasure. We actually want oneness and balance. We don't want pain. We don't want the pain of ignorance and all these different things. All of us are looking for enlightenment, but we just don't know it's possible. And so to circle back to David Foster Wallace writing about pain, what he wrote about was people dealing with this overload of pain, because when you enter into this system of pleasure, when you're fully immersed in pleasure and you never address these problems, they just fester and they grow into this crazy monstrosity. And that's what we see with a lot of these characters. They're just terrible people that have these terrible problems. And Wallace is writing about them, and they're trying to do a flamethrower on them. And that's a really good idea. That's how you can write about this. You can write about what happens if you don't acknowledge this, what happens. And all you have to do is look around and wonder what's going on inside. And that's what's interesting. The second chapter of Infinite Jest is just pages upon pages of Oren worried about his drug deal, worried about getting his weed. And that is a massive amount. He's looking for this pleasure, but he has a massive amount of pain. He has a massive amount of problems. And the language and writing, it's a beautiful depiction of that. And today, the maximalist style is better than ever for this because we are living in maximalist times. David tapped into this a long time ago. Our experience with these problems and what it feels like inside when you're dealing with this does not feel like a quiet, tender voice. It feels like the worst thing ever. I deal with this all the time with addiction, not really, but like the pull toward using technology way too much and getting sucked into the news and a bunch of other crap. And when I try to beat that with the stick, it is way worse than I think it is. the pull to not create and destroy and seek this kind of pleasure comatose is insane. So there are some quick writing tips at the end after a little bit of theory on media and stuff. Create, find these monstrosities and then give them a voice. They could be in as someone as simple as Hal, or a professional football player, and then most likely use the maximalist style to show us that.